It's a story that I did that took and reimagined the Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. Here I'm experimenting with the actual process of telling stories. So I love comics, and I love doing art for comics, and I love telling stories. But I'm still trying to find what's the best process for me. So like, for example, here, I did really complete pencils because I was going for a particular look for this book. The challenge was drawing comics, I think, is when it comes to making spaces look real and you have to draw a crowded scene, at first it just seems so intimidating. Oh man, there's just, you have to fill the whole page with people. But once you start drawing it, it's really fun because each one of those background figures, especially the ones in the first couple of rows, they become real characters. You think about who they are, and you draw faces, and they have certain characteristics. And it just becomes really fun. I think telling stories through comics is one of the funnest things an artist can do. It takes a while, but it's really fun. You're in total control of how the story is going to flow. The book was set in the 1930s, 1940s, and I wanted to make it feel a certain way. So what I did here is I worked full size. Oh, not full size, but it's the size of what comic book artists worked for a long time to reduce down. And I did complete pencils. Later on, I inked them digitally, and I added tones to the final work before it got colored. So as it was with any comic book page, the real challenge most of the time is the actual storytelling. But you can kind of see that the backgrounds, a lot of the backgrounds are empty because they got painted in later on. I was mainly focusing on the figures and trying to make the poses very natural, and also try to compose the main elements of the story so that the eye moves from one panel to the next. Playing with shadows. And one thing that computers do offer, which is wonderful, I think, is this is, for example, is a scene that happens in the rain. It's a fight scene that happens in the rain. I indicated very lightly the direction of the raindrops, mostly to actually control the flow of the story. Later on, when this page was digitized, that's when the background got put in, and it really saved a lot of time. It saved a lot of time to do that, and it was an interesting experiment. It's something that I enjoyed trying. Funny enough, I think the most dynamic panel in all of this is the panel that has hardly any lines in it. I think that this panel here that was knocked out as a silhouette is probably the most dynamic panel. It's almost, in this case, it's almost less information. Maybe it's because your eye moves through it quickly. And because the eye moves through it quickly, you almost create an illusion of movement. Rather than somewhere where you put a lot of detail in, the eye lingers there, and so this figure is not moving as quickly for you. Again, this is all experimentation about how to create pages having the technology that computers provide. Now, as I went through the book, I also did try to do some more traditional style pages where all of the inking was done on the page. And that created a different look, very high contrast compared to the rest of the book. So as the story went, the story pacing changed as the scenes changed and as style changed. The current project that I'm working on now, I'm trying to utilize some of the things that I learned in the Monte Cristo story. Again, I'm working with really tight pencils. In fact, it's almost a pencil drawing, really, is what it is. But it's a pencil drawing done very tightly, so it looks like it's inked, or it could be inked easily. Here, however, what I'm trying to do is, actually I'm working one-to-one. This is a printed size of the page. So all of the detail that gets put in is not going to get lost. All of this is going to reproduce just the way it is. And again, this gets digitally enhanced with tonal gray tone washings. So for example, in a scene like this, where you have a stormy sea, I can go in and actually layer some washes showing raindrops and splashes from the waves. Now, this one is an interesting, actually this whole project is interesting because this will be published digitally first. So this creates an extra challenge storytelling-wise because of the requirement that when this gets published, it's going to get published, every half a page will be one digital screen. So there is no way, when you storytell, when you lay out a page, you can't have a third tier of panels that runs across the page in the middle, because that would actually get chopped off in the middle. So as I lay the pages out, it's a challenge to make it exciting and interesting and also still have them all tied together, but not have anything in the middle. At least for me, it's a challenge. So again, as you notice, it's all done with half pages, but I also wanted to make it look good as a one full page. So there's some, again, you can see the indications for where the shadows are, but the shadows would get dropped in later on digitally with a wash, a gray wash. Here, so this is a project that I'm hoping to work on after this is done, after the current project is done. It's going to be a story based on Russian mythology. Kind of a, actually it would be more of a historical fiction. A Russian historical fiction comic book, and there's some ideas for some pinups. Again, these are full size, probably get inked, depending on what kind of effects I'll be going for. See, a piece like that, which is pencils only indicate where the shapes are. Most of it is going to be texture. There's going to be texture on the. This is a bear fur that's actually made into a cloak. So there's going to be texture done on the fur, which is different than the texture done on the helmet and the chain link mail that's surrounding his head, which is different than his beard, which is different than the sword, which is all of it is different than the background cloaked figure holding up a staff. It's an old kind of like a priest, a pagan priest. So something like that would be just all about texture and just having fun with it. And that's one of the things I really do enjoy about drawing. I do really enjoy inking. It is more time consuming, but it creates a certain look. And to me, it's almost like a more finished look. I feel like it's something that's more complete. And partially why I like inking is because when you're penciling, you're just using the pencil most of the times. You can rotate the pencil, use thick lines, thin lines. But with inking, you can be using sponges, you could be using brushes, you could be using quills, you could be using sticks. I mean, there's pens, markers. It's just a variety. The variety is huge, and because of that, you get different effects and different weight of lines. And I just love that. Yeah, this was kind of neat because this one. Actually, this is a bit of an homage, I believe is the right word, to an old-time illustrator, Rene Bull. He illustrated a book of Arabian Tales, and he had this garland of flowers that I just thought was beautifully done. I always looked for it got stuck in my mind, and I kept looking and thinking about a place where I could put it. And then when this piece turned up, I wanted to do a masterpiece, and I just thought it was just perfect to tie the whole composition together to make the garland of flowers go across and kind of have a symmetry with the figures. Yeah, this was actually, I'm a huge fan of Barry Windsor Smith, who's an artist who did Conan the Barbarian. So I was looking at some of his stuff, and I just got inspired to draw Conan. So this is my take on Conan the Cimmerian. Yeah. It just, the challenge here was actually drawing hands, making hands that look like they grip something. I really appreciate artists who draw solid hands and eyes. Those are the toughest, I tell you. But this was fun. It was fun to draw somebody who's solidly built, but not overly muscular like the professional wrestlers, but somebody who looks like he's got muscle from physical activity, not from going to the gym. I guess that's kind of the challenge there. But it was fun, and of course then I get to noodle all the detail. So this would be something I look forward to inking. Yeah. So I believe that for me personally, when I draw with a pencil, and in fact I'll even step back. I'll say when I draw with a blue pencil, the drawing isn't quite finished. It's not there yet. So I feel like I have a lot more freedom to experiment. My figures are a little bit looser, my faces are a little bit more expressive, My hands are a little more expressive. They might be funky somewhat, but they're definitely more expressive. The next step is to take the blue pencil drawing and transform it into a finished pencil drawing. And as I go through that step, things get a little tighter, they get a little bit more defined, but as they get a little more defined, it loses a little bit of life. Now, this is the stage that this project is at, that's the finished pencil drawing. And so I feel that there's some extra movement in there that is actually it's almost just present in the line itself. The next step for me would be to go ahead and ink it. And with ink, as I talked earlier, there's just all kinds of tools you can use. And you can use splatter, you can use brushes, you can use sponges, you can use pens. And using those tools, you finish the drawing up, you make it more solid. But there's always a possibility to make it stiffer, to let the figures lose a little bit more life. You know, as you go through the drawing, it loses life a little bit down the path. The challenge is to keep it loose. The challenge is to keep it going. But I will say that having to ink a piece for me, I feel like I have put a final point on that project, because it's done. It cannot be changed. Once you ink it, granted you can go in with whiteout, you can manipulate it digitally, but to me it feels more finished, whereas pencils don't feel as finished. So it's a toss-up. It's a toss-up between how you approach things, and I think it's a toss-up between what project you're working on and what decision you want to make of how you want it to look.